Hello, friends. Today, we are continuing our exploration of the Dart programming language and the Flutter framework, and we have a very important topic. We will discuss what stateless and stateful widgets are, their key differences, and most importantly, we'll learn how to create our own custom widgets. If you're a complete beginner in programming, don't worry. I will explain everything in detail and from the very beginning. So, before we dive into the main differences between stateless and stateful widgets, let's recall what widgets are. In Flutter, a widget is the basic building block of the user interface. Everything you see on your app's screen is made of widgets: text, buttons, images, lists, forms, and so on. The Flutter framework represents the interface as a tree of widgets. In the previous lesson, we already used widgets such as Material App, Scaffold, Text, and Center. However, in Flutter, we can create our own widgets by inheriting from the stateless widget or stateful widget classes. Creating your own widgets allows you to combine multiple widgets into one and more. Let's start by creating stateless widgets. For example, we want to create a widget that will represent our application. Here's how it's done. We create a regular class, and by using the keyword extends, we inherit from stateless widget. You will see that the IDE underlines an error because we need to override the build method. This method returns an object of type widget. The build method is a function that tells Flutter exactly how your widget should look. Every time the widget needs to be displayed on the screen, Flutter calls this method to construct its user interface. Note that this function has one parameter of type build context. This object contains information about the widget's context within the widget tree. We won't go into detail about it right now, but we will cover it in future lessons. Let's transfer our app from the previous lesson into our widget. To do this, we will simply return a widget tree in the build method, consisting of a Material App as the root widget. Next, we have Scaffold as the home parameter of our Material App. Then, we have Center and Text widgets. Thus, we've created our own widget that combines all of these widgets. Let's try using it. We will pass it to the RunApp method. In the previous lesson, we learned that this method must take a Material App. But since our custom widget returns a Material App, everything is fine. Let's try running our code. As you can see, everything works just like in the previous lesson, but this time, we created our own widget and used it. Now, let's try making our text larger and change its color. To do this, we need to use the style parameter in our text widget. This parameter is of type text style, so let's create its instance. The text style constructor has many named parameters such as font size, color, and so on. Let's start by passing font size and setting the size to, say, 40. We will also change the color by passing an object of type color. We can do this as follows. There is an abstract class called colors that contains static variables of type color for different colors. As we remember, we can access a static field without creating an instance of the object just through a dot. Let's use the green color, for example, by accessing the green field. To see the changes, we can either restart our app or use a Flutter feature called Hot Reload. Hot Reload is a feature that allows you to instantly see changes in the app without the need to fully restart it. When you make changes to the code, such as adding a new widget or changing the text, you can simply save the file by pressing Ctrl+S and see the changes. However, this would not work if we hadn't moved our app into a separate widget, but, like in previous examples, did everything directly in the RunApp method. It's a long explanation as to why, but simply put, when everything is put together in one place, like RunApp, and not divided into widgets, Flutter cannot recognize the boundaries of updates and which parts of the widget tree were changed. Let's press Ctrl+S and see the result. As you can see, our text became larger and changed color. We've created our own stateless widget and made it contain our app. As the name suggests, stateless widgets do not have a state and do not change after creation. They display what was initially set within them. Now, let's move on to stateful widgets. Unlike stateless widgets, stateful widgets have a state. Such widgets can change during the app's operation. Imagine the same text, but now it can change its value when clicked. Let's create such a widget. For faster widget creation, we can use the help of the IDE and use shortcuts. We can start typing assetful and press enter, and Android Studio will generate the basic structure of the widget for us. All we need to do is specify a name. This way, two classes are created. The first class has the original name and inherits from stateful widget. Notice that it doesn't have the build method, but it has a createState method that returns an object of type state with the generic of our class. The IDE also created a constant constructor with one named parameter from the parent class. For now, you can ignore it. It's not mandatory. Right now, it might look very confusing, but don't worry, you'll understand soon. By default, the shortcut works so that this method returns an instance of our second class. Let's take a look at it. First of all, it is private and has the state suffix in its name. The name can be anything, but this is the name Android Studio generated based on the original. This class inherits from the state class. Notice that when we inherit from it, we also specify our first class as a generic. This is why we were able to return an instance of that class in the createState method, as it inherits from that type and thus can be considered as such. In the class responsible for the state, we already have a build method. Let's return text, just like we did before. Now, we want the text to change when clicked. For this, we need to track clicks. In Flutter, there is a widget called Inkwell. We need to wrap the widget we want to track clicks on with this widget. This can be done using our IDE, as we learned in the previous lesson. This widget takes in its constructor parameters such as child, which represents the widget to be tracked, and many other parameters like onTap, onDoubleTap, and so on. Right now, we need the onTap parameter. We should pass a simple anonymous function to this parameter, inside which we will write the code to execute when the button is clicked. For example, let's print a message to the console for now. I suggest using our widget now. We will replace the text in our widget that represents the app with our new widget. Here's how it looks. Note that we are creating the widget through the class that inherits from stateful widget, not from the class that inherits from state. Let's restart our app. Visually, nothing has changed. But if we click on our text, we'll see a message in the console. Now, to change the text upon clicking, I suggest moving it into a separate variable. This way, when the button is clicked, we can change the variable's value inside the anonymous function. Let's run the code and see what happens. After clicking the button, we see a message in the console, but our text doesn't change. The reason is that Flutter does not automatically update the interface when we change the state, in this case, the variable. To let Flutter know that we need to update the interface, we must call the setState method. Note that this method only exists inside our state class. This method takes one parameter, namely an anonymous function. Inside this function, we need to change our state, such as the value of the variable. This way, after calling this method, Flutter will understand that it needs to redraw the interface. Let's restart the code again. As you can see, this time when we click on the text, it changes its value. Now you understand what stateless and stateful widgets are, how they differ, and how to create your own widgets in Flutter. This is the foundation on which any Flutter app is built. First, we use widgets to create static UI elements using stateless widgets. But when we need to respond to user actions or changing data, we use stateful widgets. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next lessons. Thanks everyone for watching, and see you in the next video.